Hi guys, this is a video to answer the questions. I did post a bulletin saying that if you asked a question, I would make a video response. So this is a video response into the channel of HesedShalom. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. And a video response to GallopingCloud. GallopingCloud's question was, how were you diagnosed with POTS? And HesedShalom's question was pretty much the same. How did you figure out you had some kind of dysautonomia? Well, the answer is the same for both. About 3.5, nearly 4 years into not being diagnosed, I was getting worse and worse. And it came to the point where I was passing out more and more, and when I'd pass out, it would be for longer periods of time. Now at that time, since I didn't have a diagnosis, doctors didn't know what it was, so they had me diagnosed with something called a conversion disorder, which is basically a mental illness. And I kid you not, every time I went to the hospital or emergency room, even if it was just a sore throat, I would have to prove to them that my throat was sore and that it wasn't mental. So one night I had passed out, and it was for a really long period of time. It was for about 4 minutes, and my mom called 911, and we went to the emergency room, and they had just dropped me off there. The doctor came in the room, didn't examine me, didn't do nothing. She was there for no more than 2 minutes, said, you know, I've looked at your records, there's nothing we can do for you, and sent me home. The very next morning, we got so frustrated with the New Mexico healthcare system that we drove straight to Arizona. With my insurance, because it's military insurance, I can go to any emergency room in the United States and it will be covered. So we decided to go to the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, and we went to their emergency room, and they basically said the same thing. There's nothing we can do for you. But we decided to sit there and not leave until we got answers and that there was something they could do for me, because they weren't really looking. So we were in the emergency room, and we refused to leave until they at least tried to look for something or tried to give me some kind of explanation. Sorry, my machine is beeping. So we were there, and the doctor said, you know, there might be something we can do. And she referred me to an autonomic specialist. The problem was I was 17 at the time, and he didn't take minors. His name is Dr. Brent Goodman, and he said, well, I will agree to see you. Come back in 3 months. So we went back to New Mexico and came back 3 months to see Dr. Brent Goodman, and he did a tilt table test. Well, let me go back. The first time I saw him was just an examination and a consult. Then he had me come back again 4 months later. Then he did a tilt table test, a cortisol test, and 2 biopsies on my leg. These biopsies were testing for neuropathies. It was a skin biopsy and a nerve biopsy. So the tilt table test did reveal that I had postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And the way that they reveal that is if your heart rate goes from lying, and when they tilt you up, your heart rate goes from more than 30 beats or more per minute, or goes up to 120 beats and continues to increase, along with a significant blood pressure drop. Now, not everybody has the blood pressure drop. That's why some people are diagnosed just with postural tachycardia syndrome, not postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or there's different types of POTS. Mine was postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and syndrome means that you have more than one thing going on. So he diagnosed me with that, and while we were doing the tilt table test, we did something called, I believe it was called a SQUART test, and you can look it up on the internet. It's all in capital letters, SQUART, and that tests for autonomic neuropathy. Now, that's when I was diagnosed with POTS along with dysautonomia, because it basically measures how much you sweat, and it's not a very comfortable test, but I will say, it's worth going through. I've had it done 3 times, the tilt table test along with the SQUART test, and that's how I figured out that I had postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS, and dysautonomia. Everybody who is getting tested for POTS or dysautonomia should also be tested for Addison's disease, because they can be easily misdiagnosed as each other. So Addison's disease is very similar to POTS, but the way they test for it is they test your blood and your urine for cortisol. What they do is basically, when I was doing the blood cortisol test, I was laying down for an hour, then she took my blood, and then I sat up for an hour, and then she took my blood again. And they test for cortisol levels, whether they increase or decrease, and for the other part, they do a 24-hour urinary sample, and to see if your cortisol levels are high in that. Basically, you have to pee in a bucket for 24 hours, then turn it into them. And my cortisol levels were way off, so we don't know what to think of that. It could just be adrenal insufficiency, because with dysautonomia, you do have problems with your adrenal glands. The 2 biopsies I had was one on my hip and one on my upper ankle. This was to test for any type of neuropathy. The nerve biopsy was to test for what caused my POTS and dysautonomia, which confirmed I had Guillain-Barré syndrome, and that was the cause of my dysautonomia and POTS. Guillain-Barré syndrome causes paralysis. It took me about a little over 2 years to relearn how to walk. And the skin biopsy was to test for other neuropathies, along with it goes hand in hand with the SQUART test, to go hand in hand with the autonomic neuropathy. I found out I went into autonomic failure in March 2010. I was going into respiratory failure, required life support, and was having liver problems. And to no surprise, I'm not very surprised this is happening, it's affected my stomach, my swallowing, my liver, my kidneys, my bladder, and it's just affected everything. I have seizures now, and so I'm on a feeding tube now. But yes, that's how I was diagnosed with the tilt table test.